Why is it that the exact same question, like how are things going, can make you feel completely valued when a peer asks it, but then instantly triggers this, minor panic attack when your boss asks it?
Right, because the words are identical. The intent of the person asking might even be identical. But that power dynamic, it completely changes the translation.
Yeah, it really does.
I mean, the listener's brain processes the peer's question as just casual curiosity, but the boss's question,
Mm.
that instantly lands as an evaluation, like, am I in trouble?
Oh, for sure. Welcome to the Deep Dives, everyone. Today, our mission is to basically shortcut the path for you to become a highly effective, trusted leader.
Which is something we all want, right?
Exactly. And we're doing this by looking at the book Lead Like This, The Language of Leadership by Justin Martin. The core idea here is really profound, actually. It's that leadership isn't just about the strategy you execute or, the title on your door. Leadership is quite literally a language.
And Martin argues that great leaders don't just have one static way of speaking. They don't just memorize a corporate script. Instead, they constantly adjust their communication based on the room they're in, without ever losing their core identity.
Right.
Because honestly, most leadership problems are not actually strategy problems. They're communication problems.
So true. So whether you lead a massive corporate division or you manage a small team of 3 or, you honestly just want to navigate your peer relationships better, this deep dive is going to reveal why some leaders effortlessly build immense trust while others just accidentally create friction everywhere they go.
Yeah, friction that they usually don't even see coming.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this because before we can learn to speak this language of leadership fluently, we really have to understand why our current communication breaks down, even when, you have the absolute best intentions.
Well, the foundation of this entire concept is recognizing the invisible gap between intent and impact.
The invisible gap.
Right. Intent is completely private. It lives exclusively inside your head. But impact is public. It's what the other person actually experiences in their nervous system.
Okay, wow.
And the moment you hold any kind of authority, neutrality just vanishes. Your words are no longer just plain data. They get interpreted through these heavy layers of hierarchy and pressure and power.
It's like the difference between a thermometer and a thermostat. A leader often thinks they're just acting like a thermometer.
Oh,
Right?
they like that.
Yeah, like they think they're just reading the temperature of the room, gathering data, asking neutral questions.
Mhm.
But because of their title, they are actually a thermostat. Their very presence, their tone, their casual remarks, they're actively changing the temperature of the room.
What's fascinating here is that leaders constantly fail to recognize that they are the thermostat.
They just don't see it.
No, they don't. So when a leader says something like, hey, we need to move faster on this project, they're usually just speaking the logic of a project timeline. But the team, hearing this through that filter of power we talked about, they hear emotion.
Right, they panic.
Exactly. They hear you are failing or your job might be at risk. They literally hear a threat.
And then what happens? The leader sees that negative impact, sees the team getting all defensive, and they instantly defend their own intent.
Every time.
They say, I was just being honest, or you're taking this the wrong way, I just meant the timeline is tight. I mean, I've definitely been guilty of that in the past.
Oh, most of us have. But defending your intent actually destroys trust because you are essentially telling your team that their lived experience matters less than your internal explanation.
Oh, wow. That's harsh but true.
Yeah, you're invalidating their reality. So to close the gap, a leader has to take full responsibility for their impact regardless of what their intent was. You have to be able to say, I can see that my words caused stress. That wasn't my intent, but I own that impact. Let's reset.
But taking responsibility for how someone else feels is incredibly difficult when you yourself are feeling defensive, which I guess naturally brings up a critical realization here.
Which is?
If our impact as leaders is so heavily warped by how others perceive our reactions, the only way to close the gap is to look inward. We can't manage the room until we manage ourselves first.
Absolutely. We have to look at the biology of why that is. Martin calls this managing the inner script, and it revolves around a very specific formula that triggers us.
Okay, what's the formula?
It's feedback plus identity equals threat.
Feedback plus identity equals threat. Okay, so if I've tied my personal worth to being like the smartest person in the room or the ultimate expert, and someone questions my project plan.
Your brain doesn't see a professional disagreement. It sees a predator.
Wait, really? A predator.
Biologically, yes, that is exactly what happens. Your nervous system completely hijacks the wheel. Blood flow literally shifts away from your prefrontal cortex, the reflection, logic, and nuance centers of your brain, and it moves straight to your amygdala.
So you literally lose biological access to logic.
Precisely. You go straight into a fight or flight response. And in a corporate setting, fight obviously doesn't mean throwing punches.
Right, hopefully not.
Yeah, it looks like over-explaining or interrupting people, raising your voice slightly, or just steamrolling alternative views with your authority.
And what about flight? What does that look like?
Flight looks like withdrawing, giving one-word answers, or just mentally checking out while politely nodding.
Okay, but let me push back on this for a second on behalf of the listener. If I'm deeply passionate about my work, how am I supposed to just separate my identity from my ideas?
That's a fair question.
Doesn't detaching like that make me seem like I don't care? Like I'm just apathetic?
That is a very common fear, but we have to understand that emotional regulation is not emotional suppression. It's not about apathy at all. It's about maintaining that access to your prefrontal cortex so you can actually be effective.
Okay, so how do we do that?
Martin suggests a really vital language shift here. You have to change your internal script from "this is my idea" to "this is an idea I am responsible for stewarding."
Oh, wow, that's subtle but huge.
It changes everything because an attack on your idea feels like an attack on you. Your body will fight to defend it.
Right.
But if you are just stewarding the idea, your ego isn't on the line. You can objectively look at the harsh feedback and ask, okay, does this make the idea better? You still maintain your passion for the project's success, but you remove your ego from the mechanics of getting there.
That is a massive cognitive shift. But how do you actually execute that in the moment? Like, let's say you're in a meeting, someone actively challenges your competence, and your heart rate is just spiking. How do you steward the idea when your biology is screaming at you to fight?
This is where the three-step reset comes in. It's basically a biological hack to get blood flow back to your executive functioning.
Okay, what's step one?
Step one is notice. You have to recognize your physiological cues, like does your jaw clench?
Well, mine definitely does.
Right. Or do your shoulders tighten up toward your ears? Do you hold your breath? You have to feel the physical threat response first.
Because if you don't notice it, you're just acting on it blindly.
Exactly. You're just a passenger. So step two is name. You cognitively label what is happening. You tell yourself internally, this is tension, not danger. This is discomfort, not disrespect.
So you're using language to manually override the amygdala.
Yes, you are telling your brain, hey, we are not being chased by a bear. We are just in a tense marketing meeting.
You are literally talking your nervous system off the ledge. I love that.
You really are. And then step three is regulate. You slow your exhale, you intentionally drop your shoulders, and you take a micro pause before responding.
Just a slight pause.
Yeah, because that pause is where leadership actually happens. That pause is the space where you choose how to respond rather than just reacting to a perceived threat.
Okay, so once you've mastered that internal state and you can regulate your own threat response, you're finally ready to face the biggest external directional challenge. Communicating up the chain of command without losing your voice.
Yes, communicating up to senior leadership, which is notoriously difficult.
Why is that?
Because time, attention, and tolerance for ambiguity are all highly compressed at the executive level. And because of that immense pressure, middle leaders often fall into a trap called filtered loyalty.
Filtered loyalty, what does that mean?
It means they soften the truth to please the boss. They sand down the rough edges of bad news because they want to avoid being labeled as, difficult or negative.
Oh, I see. But by doing that, they leave the organization completely blind to the realities on the front line. Like the executives are making strategic decisions based on a fictional, sanitized version of the company.
Exactly. And the executives know it. They don't want compliance. They want signal over noise. They rely on middle leaders to provide the actual texture of what's happening.
Right.
The problem is, when middle leaders finally do speak up, they often confuse venting with advocacy.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because there is a profound difference between the two. It's like communicating up is like being a translator, not a megaphone.
Ooh, a translator, not a megaphone. Say more about that.
Well, you can't just take the raw noise of your frontline team's frustration and just blast it at the executives. You have to translate it into the language of risk, trade-offs, and outcomes.
That is a perfect analogy, because a megaphone just amplifies the panic. But a translator makes the information actionable. Senior leaders are balancing strategy, capital, timelines.
Right, they have a totally different view.
Exactly. So venting is basically transferring your emotion upward without taking any responsibility. It sounds like, my team is so burnt out, everything is a mess, the new software doesn't work at all.
Yeah, that's just noise.
But advocacy is translating that reality upward with a purpose.
So how do we make sure we're translating and not just blasting the megaphone? Because, I mean, I've definitely gone into a boss's office and just unloaded a list of problems, thinking I was, keeping them in the loop.
We've all been there. Martin provides a really practical 3-layer filter to run through your mind before you speak to power. Let's use your software rollout as an example.
Okay, my team is struggling with the new system.
Right. Layer 1 asks, is this about ego or impact? Like, are you bringing this up because you're personally annoyed by the new interface and you don't want to learn it? Or is it genuinely threatening the Q3 deliverables? It has to be anchored to impact.
That makes sense. If it's just my ego, I need to keep it to myself.
Precisely. Layer 2 asks, what does leadership need to decide right now? They do not need a chronological history of every single IT ticket your team submitted.
Right, they don't have the time for that.
They need the inflection point. They need to know, do we pause the rollout or push through the bugs? Give them the decision, not the diary.
Give them the decision, not the diary. I need to write that down. And layer 3.
Layer 3 asks, can I say this with calm conviction? If your heart rate is elevated, or if you're speaking way too fast, or if you feel defensive, your framing just isn't ready.
Because they'll just hear the emotion.
Exactly. They will hear your anxiety instead of your data, and they'll dismiss you.
That calm conviction fundamentally changes the language you use. Like, instead of using absolute statements like, this software will never work, which just sounds like resistance to change.
Right.
You shift to outcome-focused framing. You say something like, I am concerned about how this software bug may impact our Q3 execution timeline.
Yes, you lay out the trade-offs. You say, look, if the goal is speed, pushing through the bugs helps. But if the goal is data integrity, this rollout is working against us.
So you aren't demanding they change the plan. You are giving them the clear signal so they can make an informed decision.
You're equipping them, not overwhelming them.
Okay, but upward communication only protects the company's strategy. The actual day-to-day culture, the air everyone breathes in the office, that is built or broken in how we speak sideways to our peers and downward to our teams.
Absolutely.
Let's look sideways first.
Well, peer conversations are surprisingly dangerous because there is no hierarchy, there is no referee, and that makes ego flare much faster.
Oh, definitely.
When a peer challenges your idea, it often feels like a direct evaluation of your competence rather than a collaboration.
Which leads to toxic behaviors, right?
Yeah.
Like triangulation. I actually have a painful memory of this from early in my career.
Oh, do share.
I was so frustrated with this peer who kept missing deadlines, and it was holding up my project. But instead of talking to him, I talked about him to 3 other colleagues by the coffee machine.
Classic triangulation.
Yeah, I thought I was just venting, but I was building a quiet alliance. I was triangulating. And it took months to repair the trust when he inevitably found out.
That is a perfect example. Triangulation feels safer in the moment because you avoid direct conflict, but it just rots trust from the inside out over time.
Yeah, it really does.
The other major trap sideways is performative debate. That's when you're arguing in a meeting just to look smart in front of the room rather than actually trying to solve the problem.
Oh man, it's disagreement with an audience in mind. You're trying to win points, not build a solution.
Exactly. And to cut through performative debate, you have to actively anchor the conversation to shared outcomes. Like, before challenging a peer in a meeting, you literally say, hey, I think we are aligned on the ultimate goal here, or we are both trying to solve this same bottleneck.
So it verbally reminds the room and the peer's nervous system that you're collaborating, not competing.
Exactly. It lowers the temperature instantly.
Okay, so that handles sideways communication. Now let's look downward. Communicating to the people who actually report to us. Because this is where trust is built or broken every single day.
It's the crucible of leadership.
Right. And the goal is creating psychological safety, delivering feedback that actually lands, and holding people accountable without creating this, culture of fear.
And the language shifts here must be highly specific. When an employee fails or misses a target, many leaders instinctively use identity-driven language. They'll say something like, I'm disappointed in you.
Oof. Which instantly triggers the employee's threat response.
Yeah.
They just feel shame, the blood leaves their prefrontal cortex, the learning completely stops, and they just want to escape the room.
Exactly. So instead, Martin says we need to shift to behavior-driven language.
What does that sound like?
You say, this result doesn't meet the standard. Let's talk about what support closes the gap.
Oh, wow.
Notice what happened there. The standard didn't drop. The accountability is completely intact. But you removed the shame by attacking the result, not the person.
Wait, but let me ask you this. If we strip out all the emotional, like if I stop saying I'm disappointed and just stick to the cold hard facts of standards and behaviors, don't we risk sounding like heartless robots to our teams?
That's a common worry.
Because doesn't that strip the humanity out of leadership?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Martin makes a really crucial distinction here between being firm and being cold. They're completely different mechanisms.
How so?
Cold leadership is detached. It's emotionally unavailable. It says, you missed the mark, and I am pulling my support away from you. Coldness uses silence and distance as a weapon.
Which makes the employee panic and try to protect themselves rather than fix the problem.
Precisely. Firm leadership, on the other hand, is clear, steady, and consistent. It says, the standard stands, the boundary is strict, but I am still right here to help you hit it.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, you can hold an incredibly strict standard while still radiating care and investment in that person. Firmness is about protecting the culture. Coldness is about protecting your own ego because you're frustrated.
Wow. Firmness protects the culture. Coldness protects the ego. That is a massive distinction.
It really is.
And, all of these directional skills we've talked about, regulating yourself, translating upward, collaborating sideways, holding firm downward, they're all put to the absolute ultimate test when a crisis hits.
Oh, absolutely. Because under pressure, you do not rise to the occasion, you sink to the level of your training.
So true.
And what usually gets revealed in a crisis is emotional contagion. Because remember, the leader is the thermostat. They're the emotional anchor of the room.
So if a major client pulls out or like a product launch fails and you as the leader are stressed, you leak that stress.
Everywhere.
You use compressed communication, clipped tones. You start barking, why isn't this fixed yet? Instead of asking, help me understand the bottleneck.
And your team catches that anxiety like a virus. That's why in a crisis, Martin insists the communication sequence must always be stabilize, orient, then act.
Stabilize, orient, act.
Right. Most leaders skip straight to action. They panic and just start handing out tasks. But if you skip to action without stabilizing the room's nervous system first, you just create chaotic, panicked motion.
So you have to stabilize the emotional temperature first. Like you acknowledge the pressure. I know this client leaving is a massive hit. Let's take a breath.
Exactly.
Then you orient them to the facts. What do we know for sure? What do we not know? And then only once the prefrontal cortex is back online for the group do you move to action.
Exactly. You provide the psychological safety net so they can actually think clearly enough to solve the crisis.
So what does this all mean? Like we've talked about the 3-step reset, the 3-layer filter, avoiding triangulation, shifting from cold to firm. How does the listener actually know when they've crossed the line from just practicing these mechanical techniques to being truly fluent in the language of leadership?
Fluency is when it becomes instinct. You no longer have to actively remind yourself to take a breath or run a mental checklist before speaking to the CEO.
It's just natural.
Yeah. And crucially, true fluency is not code switching. You aren't putting on a fake persona for the executives and a totally different one for your direct reports.
You're not just acting a part.
No, you are unmistakably yourself in every room, but you adapt your tone, your pacing, and your focus to what that specific room needs, while your core values and principles remain completely rock solid.
That makes perfect sense.
You stop translating the rules in your head, and it just becomes who you are. Your regulated nervous system acts as the anchor for the entire room, no matter how chaotic things get.
Bringing this all together, I think the ultimate takeaway here is that great leadership communication is never about sounding the most impressive. It's not about having the perfect corporate script or, being the loudest, most dominant voice in the room.
Not at all.
It is simply about making the people who talk to you feel better, clearer, and stronger. It's about becoming the leader people trust to talk to, especially when things are really hard.
Which actually raises an important question, something for you to mull over after we wrap up today.
What's that?
Well, if leadership is a language, and your team is constantly mirroring your emotional baseline, what unspoken dialect are you accidentally teaching them right now through your silence, your body language, or your unexamined reactions?
Wow. That is a heavy but vital question to carry with you. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Remember, the right words, delivered with the right tone at the right moment, can change absolutely everything.